and our lives are becoming better. And there's no reason to think these technologies aren't going to do it. But we have to know that the jobs of the future are not going to be the jobs of the last 20, 30 years. They are going to be something new. And we should be curious enough to accept that that's going to happen.
Win with Jimmy Nguyen, the vodcast for life and career insights from global winners. For this episode, I'm in London and honored to speak with Daniel Doll-Steinberg, co-founder of EdenBase, an innovation venture fund and ecosystem here in the United Kingdom to supercharge the innovation of emerging tech ventures. Along with Stuart Leaf, Daniel is also co-author of a book called Unsupervised, which was selected by Bloomberg as one of the best books of 2023. It describes the advancement of new frontier technologies. Daniel has had a career in disruptive technologies for over 3 decades, beginning with global derivatives trading tech in London and New York. Daniel has also created one of the first digital rights management technology companies that revolutionized the gaming and software industries with activation keys and new ways for consumers to access licensed content. In 2017, Daniel was the first collaborator and co-founder of the Atari token project, along with an Ethereum co-founder and legends of the game industry, to create a metaverse project which he hoped to transform the future of work. Daniel has also lent his expertise as an expert advisor to government agencies with the European Union Commission and the UK government, providing insights into innovation, technology growth, and the future of work. I'm so thrilled and honored to welcome to Win with Jimmy Nguyen, Daniel Doll-Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. What a lovely introduction.
Well, you've had quite a storied life and career, which is really what I want to begin talking about. You know, the point of this vodcast is to learn lessons from people like you who have achieved some interesting wins in life. But it all starts with where you all started. Tell us where you grew up in your childhood.
Yeah, so I was born in London, still in London. I've lived in a few other cities, but my parents are not from the UK.
Right.
My father is a Jewish refugee at the age of 4 to the UK just before the Second World War, and sadly, almost all his family were wiped out. Bizarrely, my mother is a German who moved to London in her early 20s, and they met here. So my only living family are German. My mother converted to Judaism actually in Jerusalem in the 60s, which was extremely unusual. So I was brought up with this sort of weird coexistence, which is I was religiously Jewish. I was genetically half Jewish. My only living family were German. I spent the summers in Germany. And so it was very interesting to see both sides. You know, my father's family, the ones that lived, were worried about, you know, me being German. But my German family were very worried about having Jewish relatives because they'd seen what had happened. And whilst they weren't involved, they knew what had happened, and it was scary that it might happen again. To add to the sort of various viewpoints I had, my father made all his money in Iran in the 70s, and so, which was very pro-Israel in the 70s. And then in the 80s, his best friend and business partner, who had to flee Iran, and a lot of his friends were Iranian, and clearly in the 80s and since then, Iran and Israel have been enemies. So I also grew up with Persian culture, and in fact, 2 of my business partners are Persian. My running partner is Persian. I spend a lot of time with Persians. And so having that sort of background has always made me see lots of sides of things, and also to not discount things just because I don't feel you should look at them. And I think that's really important. And I'm very lucky my family life was really, really good. But because we were sort of not quite in any community, we also had this very tight bond.
I'm glad you shared that life experience. It has some similarities with mine. I was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and so my entire family, including myself, were immigrant refugees to the United States. So unlike you, I have a slight difference, but not that much because I don't really remember anything about Vietnam. I was only 2 years old when my family fled at the end of the war in 1975. And growing up in the United States, I often had this feeling of am I American? Am I Vietnamese? Right? Am I both? But it has really influenced a lot of the decisions I make in life and career, and especially why I work in new technologies now. I feel like they're really empowering to people to fulfill their potential, especially in underrepresented and oppressed populations. But I've always had a bit of an identity struggle my whole life. I'm curious if you've had the same when people ask you what your ethnic background is or where are you from. I get that sort of vague question a lot. How do you answer?
Well, actually, I feel very British. I love London.
Right.
I was discussing earlier, actually, London is a fantastic city to live in.
It is.
And I've lived in a few. I've visited many, and actually, when you add everything together, it's a fantastic place. So I do feel very British, and I don't really feel disconnected to that. So no, I think I have a strong identity. I wouldn't want to leave London. I'm not saying I ever would, but I do feel this is a great home. It is also very diverse, and there are a lot of things going on here. So no, I don't really have an identity crisis.
Well, good for you. I've struggled with it somewhat a lot of my life. Did being the child of immigrant refugees influence thoughts or discussions you had with yourself or even with your parents about what you could or wanted to accomplish in life?
Not because of the immigrant status, but both my parents were very entrepreneurial. So my father was a double first at Cambridge, a scholar there as a refugee, extremely bright. I mean, incredibly bright, very successful. Starting with absolutely nothing and no food when he was young, and became very successful. Retired very early. My mother, very opposite character. Very quick decision-making, but also built in the 70s one of the biggest tour guide companies in the UK. It actually, when my father started working on his own, that supported us when he had no income. And so I always looked at people doing their own thing. And it never struck me that I would ever do anything but eventually build my own businesses and work with people doing what I want to do. And I think my brain, positively and negatively, was very suited to that. So academically at school, I went to an extremely good school in the UK. I was on detention every day. How
did that make your parents feel?
I actually got off it because I was a very good rugby player, and so I was always allowed not to do detention. But I was always in trouble. I was considered a naughty child. When I told my Sir Master when I was 15, when he was talking about careers, that I wanted to go into business on my own, he looked at me as if I was crazy. Right. Everyone else was going into politics or law or finance. And so I struggled academically. When I was pushed hard, I did very well, hence I got into this good school. But university, again, I just struggled at university, just scraped through. When I graduated, one of my tutors that liked me said, for God's sake, don't become an electronic engineer, go into sales or politics. And the other one said, we tried to draw the line above you. And so going into corporate world, which I did very briefly, I did okay. But it was my parents' inspiration and the way that they thought, and obviously genetics, that made me want to do things on my own.
Fantastic. So I think that's really important to underline for many of those watching, especially younger people around the world, which there's this often misconception that you have to do super well in school academically to succeed later in life, which is helpful. Let's not minimize that. But you are an example, as we'll talk about, as someone who's achieved some great wins in life and career with the acknowledgement that your academic life and history was not the very best, but you can find ways to really pursue on. So let's talk about what prompted you then to go against one of your teacher's pieces of advice and study electrical engineering. What interested you in that?
Well, actually, I studied electronic engineering not because I wanted to, but my father suggested I do it. And, I was relatively immature and not understanding myself. And so I went in to do that. And it was a bad subject for me. I should have done something. There's no right and wrong where you didn't have to learn a lot. I didn't understand that until later. The fact that I did electronic engineering, despite the fact that I wasn't particularly good at it academically, allowed me, however, to get a job in the City of London when derivatives were very early. And I found that really fascinating. But I think that was my brain that allowed me to do it rather than my education. But I was able to get the job because they looked at my degree and the subjects I had done. So had I done philosophy, would have been unlikely to get that job. And those jobs I had in those days were fundamental to where I've ended up today.
Yeah, so you stepped into the world of financial engineering, right, where the traditional industries of financial services were looking at incorporating technology, especially this was, I'm sure, the time of the internet boom, where all of a sudden digital technologies were more accessible to us as users, consumers, as well as businesses. That's when I started my legal career, and industries were looking at, well, how do we apply new digital technologies, and in the case of financial services, financial engineering, to speed up, make more efficient trading. So tell us some of what you did to help revolutionize or disrupt the financial services world of derivative trading.
Well, I was actually a small cog in a big wheel, but I found it fascinating, and my career accelerated. So it was really, I mean, the internet existed, but mainly in universities. It was the early 90s, so it wasn't global quite yet. But what had happened is you had computers that were powerful enough to solve the Black-Scholes formula and allow you to price derivatives. And that was the first thing. I mean, that was 4 or 5 years in. But in the early 90s, the technology was becoming more powerful that you could create more complicated derivatives like swaptions and limited swaptions and different type of instruments. And my role was to build a technology that allowed you to price those. And I found that fascinating, but also fascinating because in the early days of derivatives, in my day, it was so incredible. The traders were solving real problems for companies, and they were customized products. It wasn't, you could buy it off the shelf. They were designing a product for somebody to solve a problem. And because of that, the market became enormous very quickly. And I saw that very quickly becoming, it's now a quadrillion-dollar asset class. It's the biggest in the world. But it was fascinating to see how a technology can create something new. And when it has a massive benefit and also a commercial value, I mean, these traders were earning millions designing these things because they were a valuable product. And so that really allowed me to see why technology is so important and set me on the path. The second job I had, or third job I had, was actually in New York, where because a lot of these technologies were built in the UK, I was quite sought after into New York. So I got married and my wife and I moved to New York. But I ended up doing something completely different. I ended up working for a bank that was going to be shut down by the US regulators. And so they quickly pivoted me into a role which was to stop the bank getting shut down. And that was another interesting experience. I was an assistant vice president. I had no power. And I was trying to get EVPs and senior vice presidents to change what they were doing. And I found that fascinating. But it was really interesting to see how difficult large corporates take transformation, even when there is an existential threat, when there is no enormous value to the people or the commercial value to some of the departments. And so those two together, seeing how technology improves things and can create markets, but also seeing how difficult technology is to adopt when there's no enormous incentive, allowed me to start thinking about what I really wanted to do with my life.
That's excellent, and I want to underline a couple of points. The first point you made, which I think is really worth reinforcing, is when you're looking at creating technology products, it's really powerful, in fact, the most powerful and commercially viable, to create a solution to an existing problem for a customer who's willing to pay for it because it will make them money or perhaps save them money. And I point that out because one of our prior sets of interview guests, the Lazaros, Mike and Cass Lazaro, that's how they created a business that they sold to Salesforce for $750 million in 2012. It started with a problem solved for a paying customer. And I think too many tech entrepreneurs skip over that step because they just have a grand idea. And the second point you made, which I think is worth underlining, is the difficulty of convincing big enterprises and legacy businesses to embrace digital transformation. It's harder than you realize, but once they do it, I think it can be really powerful. Let's move to one of my favorite things you've done in your life, one of your biggest wins, which is near and dear to my heart because I'm a former intellectual property lawyer and digital tech lawyer for a lot of years in the U.S., and that is create a solution for digital rights management. Tell us what you did and when you did it and how it changed the software, gaming, and entertainment industries.
Well, taking one step back, I've always tried to do something that is a challenge. And I found that once I've achieved it, I want to do a next challenge. And when I was working in New York, the first 18 months was incredibly exciting. I had no power. And then suddenly I was, in effect, the seventh most powerful person in the bank, reporting to the board. And the job became boring because I didn't have to convince people to do things. I could tell them. So over the next 6 months, I was thinking of what I wanted to do next. And this was the late 90s. It was 97. And as you know, you mentioned it earlier, the world was going online. And I knew some people in the computer gaming industry, and I was looking at their challenges. And I realized that distribution into retail, but also the way that they were managing their product with license keys was about to change because we were going connected. So instead of the disk being valuable, it was the license key that was going to be the valuable part. And so between 99 and 2010, we convinced all the major software companies to adopt a technology that we built, a digital rights management technology that managed their license keys rather than protecting the disk. So we became one of the first, maybe the first, but certainly one of the first big license key holders for all the software companies. We were big holders for Microsoft, Adobe, Symantec, and then eventually a lot of the games companies, Eidos, Activision, started using our technology. And again, it was seeing how technology, which was connected devices and the internet, was enabling something new that had value to the publishers, but also to their resellers and their consumers. And so whilst it was a very difficult thing to achieve because you were walking into Microsoft and saying, give us all your license keys, which is your value, it's a difficult thing for them to do. And it took
the door to the gates.
Yeah. It took 7 years to get Microsoft to do this. And we had to get other publishers, et cetera, et cetera. The value that it delivered and the opening up for streaming, which was actually a trend we missed. We missed the whole streaming side and the Steam, et cetera. For personal reasons, I was not focused on it. But that enabled what we have today, which is this no one has a disk anymore. No one has a license key anymore. It's moved to a completely digital world.
What was the name of the company?
The company was called Tribeca. It was a B2B.
Yeah,
it won a Wall Street Journal Innovation Award, the Global in 99. I mean, it won all the European retail awards. But it was a company no one really heard of because it was in the background.
Was that the first company you founded as an entrepreneur?
That was. Yeah.
Let's talk about that experience. How was it to launch, build, grow your own company, especially in a field where you have to convince big players to hand over valuable assets, their license keys to you?
Well, it's difficult to say because I don't have a relative to say it was easy or hard. It was very hard. It was hard to build a strong team to build the product. It was hard to get money into the company. It was hard to go to big companies and say, will you do this? Generally, I come across as relatively trustworthy and relatively persuasive. So it was possible. But we went through all the problems that you had. We built teams and then they left and then we ran out of money and then we had to get money again. Then we expanded into lots of territories and then the financial crash happened. And your immediate reaction as an entrepreneur, funnily enough, is it's not the financial crash, it's my product. So you're desperately trying to keep clients who you should actually let go. So we made that mistake for a long time, which was, keeping clients that, just weren't in a position to continue, and that's very expensive. But it's an amazing thing to do, and it's an amazing thing to change the way something operates. And it's nice to be proven after many years of a lot of people saying, no, this is impossible, to actually achieve something. And one of the most important things, I think, and you talk about winning, achieving something is the value. And allowing other things to be built on top of what you've achieved is also phenomenally rewarding. And I think people forget that. They always look at the check at the end of it, but it's not that.
I absolutely love that you pointed that out. It's something I try to talk about. And, we're not immune to the fact that most people want to make money, want to accomplish things that are societally valued as wins. But I get my best satisfaction in life and personal matters out of doing things that make me feel like I'm building something, achieving something, leaving something that others can build upon. So I'm glad that's important to you as well. Which takes me to the world of blockchain, which is how we've gotten to interact apparently in years past that I had forgotten about. And you started learning about blockchain. And the reason I think it's interesting you went from DRM to blockchain is I look at blockchain technology today, and it is an exceptionally powerful tool to implement license key activation and access control to consumers, had it existed back in the 90s. And I wish we saw more of that in blockchain applications today. Tell us how you first got interested in blockchain and how you learned about it.
Well, again, it's a personal story. One of the things that, has allowed me to do what I do is I've been married many years. I met my wife when we were very young. And marriage is also a project that you have to have. And my marriage is, I love my wife, I love my kids. The foundation that gives me allows me to explore and be curious and do things that I want to do. And that is extremely important. And I mentioned that because of why I learned about blockchain. In 2012, my father died very suddenly. And I had to spend about 2 years sorting out he was a very successful man, but I had to sort out an estate and I got very distracted. And when I came back, I started investing in companies. And I really wanted to invest in AI companies because that was exciting. But as a private investor, I couldn't because I either had to back them when they were a piece of paper and two people, it was normally two guys, with an idea. Because later than that, they were going to the big VCs and they weren't interested in private checks, even though I had a name in technology. So I started investing in innovative technologies. I started in co-founding a lot of businesses with people that wanted me to co-found. And in 2014, my father-in-law came to me and he said, my father-in-law was the opposite of my father. He left school at 16. He's like a visiting professor at Yale. He's built 30 million square feet of space in London. He's phenomenally creative. But the opposite. But he came to me and he said, Daniel, what are you doing with your life? What is the outcome of this? You're investing in all these things. You're co-founding all these businesses. You need to focus. And I respect him a lot. And it made me think, what am I doing? So in 2015, I started cutting down everything I was doing and just focusing on what is the one thing I need to be doing. And one of the people that I was investing with, who was at IBM at the time, a guy called Barry Heptonstall, who was seconded to the blockchain team, mentioned on the tube home in 2 stops this thing called blockchain. And I was like, what the hell is that? And because I'd done derivative trading and license keys, the value transfer was appealing to me. So I said, tell me about it. So he invited me into his office and he gave me a day lecture on blockchain, Ethereum, all the issues with the fork and what Fabric, which was the IBM blockchain.
Right. And the
I was like,
Hyperledger.
this is insane. This is really insane. And what I realized in 2016 after thinking about it for a while is this is an enabling technology to all the other technologies we have because you can create smart data. And once you create smart data, then AI, quantum, all the other technologies we're trying to build, it enables them to accelerate. So I went to him in 2016. I said, we need to take advantage of this. We need to be doing something that allows companies to use these technologies in a way that they're going to use them. And having been through transformation, having been through disruptive tech, but also innovative tech, I was trying to find a way that you can deploy this. And that's where the idea of the fund came from in 2016 originally. And I got sidetracked. But blockchain to me is a phenomenally powerful technology that is not sold in the right way. And because it's not sold in the right way and it doesn't know what its purpose is, or the people selling it don't know what the purpose is, it's failing to deliver what it should be delivering today.
I agree with you on that. As you know, I've worked in the industry of Bitcoin and blockchain for quite some time, and it is been one of my frustrations in the industry. So tell us how that led you to launching the Atari token project, and what were you trying to accomplish through that?
So the Atari token project, you mentioned it slightly earlier, which is license keys transfer on the blockchain should be a very powerful tool.
Absolutely.
You mentioned that. Yeah. And
that's where my head goes as an IP lawyer, blockchain person, right?
So when I started learning about blockchain in late 2016, as I said, well, I learned about it earlier, but then I was thinking about how you would apply it, and we were looking at how you create a fund that can use these technologies. Being very practical and entrepreneurial, I wanted to try it myself. So I went to some of the people that were working for my license key company. I said, just build me blockchain stuff. And they said, well, what should we build? I said, I don't know, just build me something. Anyway, they came back about 3 months later, and they built on the IBM blockchain in Fabric. I think it was 0.8 at the time. Mm-hmm. They built a license key transfer mechanism. I thought, that's cool. Okay, but build it now on Ethereum. So they came back 3 or 4 months later, and they'd built an Ethereum server. They'd built license key transactions on Ethereum. And I thought, what can we do with this? And as luck would happen, everything's about luck and, who you meet. And I happened to be at lunch with 2 old school friends that I don't see very often. One who was in politics. He was the ex-culture minister. And one who is a gaming legend. He built computer games. He was out in Dallas building with the Epic guys and Demis Hassibis and all those guys, Jez San, who were the early gaming guys. And he was still in gaming. And we were all talking about what we do. And I said to him, I built this, in blockchain, I built this license key thing. And he phoned me about 3 days later. He said, do you know what we can do with this is we can revolutionize the computer gaming industry. And this is exactly what the fund is about. It's about finding people that understand their domain, explaining to them new technologies and working out how they can integrate them to solve real problems for their industry and their consumers. So he came back to me and he said, we should build this. And I said, fine. And he became the second co-founder. He knew exactly what he was building, it became a metaverse company. It was the first ever metaverse company, which I think should be built one day. It's a very complicated product when you actually understand what you need to deliver. And he set me 2 tasks. The first was to get a big brand. He said, if we're going to do a token project in 2017, it was now early 2017, we need a brand. We don't want to be this token or that token.
Daniel Coin.
Daniel Coin. There was a Daniel Coin. It was an April 1st joke, and I was apparently the marketing officer. It was in 2018. But we want a brand. So he said, the only brand that we should have is Atari, because Atari is the most powerful game brand, but it doesn't actually do anything anymore. So he tasked me with doing that. So Atari joined us as the third founder, the CEO of Atari at the time. And we became the Atari token, but we didn't announce that until much later. We just carried on building. And then he said, we need the best decentralized person that we can possibly find. And as I went around the world, I met a guy called Anthony Diorio, who is the second founder of Ethereum. And I really liked him. I really liked his vision. I really liked what he was trying to achieve. And so he and I started talking together, and he became the 4th founder of this project. And so at that stage, this was sort of mid-2018 now, it was not my dream to build this project. It was my dream to incept the project and go and build a fund. But because it became such a big project, I had to stay in it till 2019 before I could exit from the project. But it is a phenomenally powerful concept and project that eventually will be built.
Still in process. The last time I checked,
it's still in process. Look, Anthony and I left the project in 2019. It stayed with Atari and the other founder. The CEO of Atari has left and gone to do his own thing. So I think there's still work on it, but I'm not involved in it.
Let's talk briefly about some of the expert advisory work you do with governments, and then we'll get on to some of your current projects. But in addition to your commercial ventures, you have been tasked by the EU Commission as well as agencies in the United Kingdom to provide some expertise. What are your favorite or most important topics for you personally to talk to them about? Future of work, or innovation?
Well, it's really interesting how I got the role, actually. So in the early 2000s, it was probably about 2004, 2005, one of the members of European Parliament decided that he was going to make intellectual property invalid across Europe.
Oh, wow.
Patents, IP, everything.
Be still my heart. Right.
And I got a call randomly. I happened to be in Birmingham, and I was going to Barcelona the next day. It's all the bees. And I got this call, and he said, "I'm the government representative of eBay. Are you coming to Brussels tomorrow?" And I said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, I've been sending you emails." So I went to Brussels with him and the government representative from Microsoft, who I met there. And I was led up to this little room, and there was a speakerphone in the middle, and then there were this group called the SME Union, which is a conservative SME group, were asking me about IP and why IP is important. And I explained, and they invited me back, and they kept inviting me back, and I didn't understand why until I found out that this was going on. And I became the figurehead of the pro-IP debate. And I started meeting really interesting people. I became friendly with people like Steve Ballmer and people from Microsoft. And I really believed passionately that this was a total disaster. And because of what we did with this grassroots campaign, eventually companies like Philips got involved and said, if you do this, we're finished, and we got 50,000 employees. Yes. And so it was quashed. Because I'd done that, I got a profile in Brussels. And eventually I was contacted by the European commissioners to ask to join their enterprise policy group and it was 2 people from each country. Everybody else seemed to be appointed by their local government. I was the only person that seemed to get it from the commission, which also gave me a very interesting perspective because I met the British government after I met the European Commission, and it's normally the other way around. And so the direction of what I was supposed to be talking about was very British, where I was talking about things that I found important. And what I found important, this was around 2007 to 2012, what I found important was the fact that Europe is concentrating heavily on a commodity trading environment. And what they really need to be doing is creating a tech environment. And I don't think the two were very consistent. So I got very interested in future of work. I got very interested in education. I got very interested in technology policy. And so that's really what I did. But I spent a lot of time learning about education. I spent a lot of time learning about work, etc., to try and give the best advice I could. And the reason I did it, because sometimes it's like bashing your head against a wall, is I felt if the UK were involved in Europe, I needed to make, even if it was one step, I needed to make Europe the best place it could be for Britain to achieve what it needs to in the future of the world.
What's your best piece of advice today to the European Commission or leaders of the UK government on how the UK and generally Europe can win with technology?
They have to open their doors massively to technology. AI regulation, data regulation that the EU have jumped in headfirst is a complete error. It's too early to regulate. When I was doing the crypto world, the token world, I preferred what the SEC were doing, which is you cannot do this. But they didn't tell you what you could do. They wanted the market to work it out. I was less keen, like most people were keen on it, I was less keen on what the Swiss did, which is saying, this is what the market's going to look like in 20 years. How do you know? It makes people build to a format that we don't know what the future is. And so we don't know what the future is with these technologies, but we can be pretty sure that if we are not building them for ourselves, we are going to be dependent on other people providing them to us. And those people are going to be building them for themselves. And we will be a second-class user of those technologies. And so my only advice is they should be the UK did it. You met my partner Eric. He created TechNation Level 39. TechNation was all about opening up Britain to technology. It didn't matter what technology. It wasn't like it can only be this technology. It can only be an entrepreneur for this country. No, please come. Please build your products here. And I think both the EU and the UK need to do that now.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the second section of our vodcast today, which is to talk about your current work. And we'll start with EdenBase, the fund that we've mentioned a few times now, and your partner, Eric Vanderklee, who I know as well. And tell us, it sounds like you had been envisioning this for a while. Tell us what finally prompted you and Eric to launch EdenBase, and what are your goals?
So in 2019, when I came back to the UK after the Atari project, I was looking at how I could move forward with the fund, which is what I was trying to do in 2016 before I did the segue into the Atari token. And the problem with an early stage fund that wanted to do the model that we wanted was you need a much bigger team than an early fund allows, which meant that we were looking at how do you raise a £500 million early stage fund, which in Europe is enormous and difficult to raise if you've never raised a fund before, because you need the fees to be able to create the team. When I met Eric in late 2019, and I went to his office. He jokes I stalked him. I sat in his office opposite him 3 days a week, just listening to what he was saying, asking him questions. And I suddenly realized through that process, and I convinced him that if you create an ecosystem and a fund together, the ecosystem is powerful and profitable enough to have the team that you need to operate a fund that can be much more like a private equity early stage fund, where you're much more selective in the companies you back, but you are giving them enormous amounts of time and expertise. And so Eric and I said we're going to launch this, and we launched it in March 2020, which was probably the best time to open an ecosystem. So promptly stopped 3 weeks later. Because the world went into lockdown, which is how the book came out, because Eric asked me to write a book in the end of the year. And we relaunched the business in 2022. But during that period, I met our third founder, who's a guy called Arian Alakhani, who was introduced to me by a friend. And we were just walking around the park together in lockdown and post-lockdown. And I was explaining to him what I was doing and the technology, and I could see he was a very successful entrepreneur, made all his money in Russia, an Iranian who'd moved to Russia. And he was investing a lot into early stage companies. And by my talking, he realized the only way that he was going to do this successfully was to do it as part of an ecosystem looking at the future. So it's the three of us that are building this business.
And describe for us what is in your ecosystem. I think most people understand what a venture fund is. It raises capital from other LPs and investors to then invest in tech startups. What is in your ecosystem that you believe helps to create wins with the fund?
So the ecosystem, the model is slightly different for the two reasons. One is it has an outsized team. So we're already 14 people, which is very unusual for an early stage fund. And they are people that have fund expertise. They are entrepreneurs. They're people that have serious tech expertise. They're people that have people expertise. One of the people, he grew a company from 200 people to 5,000 people in 4 years. The ability to understand how that works. And he ran the sales and marketing team. That type of expertise is very difficult for startups to get hold of. And it's that combination. The second part is what Eric is so good at. Eric is good at creating virtual and physical spaces in which you get super growth. So TechNation, which was his first more virtual, it was Shoreditch, where we are today, is because of Eric. It's the tech center because he identified it as a space. But I call it virtual because there's no physical one space, it's multiple spaces.
Give him the title of King of Shoreditch.
King of Shoreditch, indeed. In fact, one of my good friends owns a big property here and he's super rich thanks to Eric. Oh. He would call him King of Shoreditch. But that TechNation has been labeled the best scale-up program anywhere in the world in terms of its metrics because of that. And then he did Level 39, which is a physical workspace in which eToro, TransferWise, Revolut, etc., all went in as small companies. The type of stage that we invest in, late seed, pre-Series A, and came out these enormous companies. And it's because he calls it orchestrated serendipity. If you put the right people in the right space together, then the connections like Metcalfe's law create very fast hypergrowth and also flexibility, because you can understand where the market is going. You're not stuck in an echo chamber of your own saying, I'm going to do this whatever happens. And fortunately and unfortunately, the world is reaching a stage with these technologies that a company that we looked at a year ago is now irrelevant, because these technologies have now either made that product unnecessary or too easy to build on your own that you don't need those companies. So founders have to be very flexible and very fast.
Tell us what types of technology ventures you are looking to invest in and support through EdenBase.
So we've already made 3 investments. We're just about to make 2 more. We're a first fund. We will close our fund at the end of this year, and we'll make 12 in this fund. So what we look for is, we don't want to take very early stage risk. So that was the issue I had in 2012. I didn't want to bet on whether a founder can create a team, build a product, sell to a customer, and raise some money. So that is the minimum we look for. It can be a friends and family round. It can be a beta product in a customer not earning revenue. But we want to be able to see that we are betting on a founder that can achieve those basics. After we find companies like that, they're interviewed by our head of the fund, who's ex-Comcast Ventures and private equity, very credible guy, and we've got our tech person and our people person. And once we're very confident in the product that they're building now and that it's growing, and also that the team is the right sort of team that we want to work with, we brainstorm how that product can solve a problem or create an opportunity, either by applying a new technology or by the change of the environment that those technologies deliver. So let's say everyone builds something on a blockchain, and that industry is now very blockchain heavy. Is this product necessary for that industry? So it's slightly wider than just saying you apply a technology. If we find one of those, we then talk to the founding team. It might take a long time, and we try and get them to understand what they should be building whilst continuing to build their current product. And if we come to a consensus and they can sell back to us that vision, then we invest in them. And the reason we're called EdenBase is Eden is like Garden of Eden. Eric's good at creating environments, and we're creating a new world, so Eden. But Base is because of Basecamp. You know, we're looking for companies that are getting to Basecamp successfully, but we're trying to find their Everest. But we don't tell them what the Everest is. We tell them what type of things they could be building. It's for them to achieve it. We're like the Sherpa helping them up there. They've still got to do all the work.
Of the 3 ventures you've already invested in, can you give us just quick summary of the fields of technology they are in?
So the first one we invested in was did 3D assets for luxury brands for e-commerce. We made that investment in 2021. I made the investment personally, and it's gone into the fund. And we just felt in 2021 that everybody would need 3D assets for multimodal AI, for immersive, and no one was talking about it. And they are now very well positioned for that.
Yeah.
And it's something that
Eric's shown us, I think, a demo of it.
It's a phenomenal product. But they've got a proprietary format. They work in the luxury field, which means their assets are in really, really good and high quality. So the data they get, the way they operate, it's very well suited. The second company is a low-code application for collaboration software. And we believe low-code is very important because it allows people to build these things within corporates and for themselves. But secondly, collaboration is likely to be one of the skills that we need more of as these technologies take over our processing parts of our job. So we like that. And also we can plug in AI and quantum into their collaboration, which is very fascinating. And the third one we've done is a fintech. It's we call it like the Revolut for SMEs for Europe. And again, they offer a lot of services to their companies that can be improved and enhanced with AI and quantum and smart data. And because these companies all build a lot of data behind them, We like data companies. The next two we're investing in, one's a travel company that does it on intention rather than I want to do this, which is a very good way of building agents, and then another fintech company.
Well, I like where you're headed. Each of those sound like excellent choices and definitely things I'd be interested in as well. You are in the middle of trying to raise a second fund, right? EdenBase II, I guess we would call it. What types of investors or LPs are you looking to secure to invest in your funds?
So we're looking for cornerstone investors for our second fund now. Our second fund will be much larger than our first. It will be 100 million. So we're looking for people that I think we're looking for two types of people. We're looking for people that want to deploy their money really, really effectively in the future. But we're also looking for people that really understand that we need to be building a world we're proud of. And that's what we're doing in effect. Our goal eventually is to be investing in 200 companies a year with a view to building products that we need, but also the community that we're building needs. So we run an event every year called Transform Base. We have 330 people, and we record all the round tables. And we have a complete cross-section of people, students, we have activists, we have family offices, we have lawyers, but some of the real estate tycoons, people that understand their industry but don't understand the other necessarily everything. And it's those conversations that lead to the actions that allow us to be building a future for more people than just we feel we know the answers to. And I think that's the important thing. It's like my book. I don't have all the answers. I have a few, but it's not for me to tell you what your answer should be. It's me to ask you the question.
Well, let's talk about your book next. I've been wanting to talk about it. For those of you who haven't picked it up yet, I ordered a copy just to read before this interview. It's Unsupervised, Navigating and Influencing a World Controlled by Powerful New Technologies. Available on Amazon.com as well as a bookstore near you. I'm preparing for my commercial reading career. So you wrote this with your colleague Stuart Leaf, and I've seen that you've described this book as outlining the investment thesis for your EdenBase fund, and it's also been described as a rallying cry for everyone across the world to pay attention to these new frontier technologies and take action. Tell us why you decided to title the book Unsupervised. Is it about fear that all of these new technologies we're talking about, AI, blockchain, quantum computing, are going to be unsupervised by those who create them?
There are two things that are unsupervised. First is we list, and the list dates back to 2021, we list the 20 most important people that are building these technologies. If I wrote the list there, I'm sure there would be people added or removed, but I think it's still pretty sound. And we're saying they're unsupervised. They're building technologies for themselves and for what they think their customer needs. And the second thing is these technologies are becoming so powerful that in effect they're learning from themselves and they're acting on their own. And they are the derivative of that unsupervision.
So the book explains the movement from the Industrial Revolution to what you describe as the cognitive revolution. And explain for us what that means to you, the cognitive revolution, and some of the frontier technologies that you describe are leading us there. So
we have this assumption today, and Stuart was the one that really sort of pushed this forward, that the society and our governance structure, our education structure, our legal structure, and our finance systems have been there forever. And we have some sort of entitlement without any work that they will continue. But actually, most of what we have today is from the Industrial Revolution. Pre-Industrial Revolution, we lived in an agricultural economy, and all of those things were completely different. We didn't have governance systems, we didn't have legal systems, we didn't have education systems. And they were built for that period. That period is now ending. It's moving to a technology-based environment. And whilst when we moved to the Industrial Revolution, the agricultural revolution was still valuable, the industrial was thousands of times more valuable. This is what's happening now. So what we're saying in this book is, as we move from the Industrial Revolution to the new economy, the technology, the people that control those technologies will be building the new rails. They will be building our new governance systems, our new legal systems, our new storytelling systems, our education systems, our health systems. And computers will be running them. So there are two impacts. The first is computers won't run them like we do. But secondly, the people that are building them in what they think we need, not what we think we need. And therefore, it is our duty, in my opinion, to be part of that if we want our view to be embodied in that.
So for those of you who haven't read the book, pick it up because you will get some good descriptions of what the authors consider frontier technologies such as blockchain technology, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and others. I want to hone in on one area of technology you focus on that I think does not receive enough attention, which is what you describe as always-on high-speed communications, which are critical to deliver the effectiveness of some of these other frontier technologies, such as AI or blockchain. You can have the greatest AI application or blockchain application, but if the users of them do not have the speed of communication and internet access to get the result onto their device to do a trade, right, in derivatives trading, or get an AI-powered answer quickly, then it's not as effective. Tell us why this is so important in your mind and what the world can be doing to improve the speed of always-on communications.
Well, we are doing that anyway. We've got 5G, we've got 6G, et cetera. And you're absolutely right when you say that, Jimmy, that the fact that we are always connected is changing the way that we operate, and it changes the way the world looks and the availability of these technologies to people, but also their use of it. But there's a second point that I think is not considered. Technology is a dematerializer. The first dematerialization is it's dematerializing our object. So in the 80s, we had a record player, a torch, a radio, maps, libraries. What do we have now? A phone. It's all on the phone. And what's allowed that? High-speed communications. Because the phone doesn't need to have everything on it. A lot of it can be in the cloud. And this is another thing we misunderstand. In my early days of the 80s, to do an upgrade, you would have to press a button and you'd download it, or get a disk, and then it was downloaded. Now they're happening seamlessly in the cloud. They're not even pushed out. They're in the cloud. When we do a search or whatever, or run an app, it's all being run in the cloud. That's updated every few seconds by the people that design it. The second dematerialization is our brain. We're downloading our cognitive functions into computers. One of the examples I use, which people always find it interesting, I say a spreadsheet is a dematerialization mechanism. I might know how to price up a real estate building. I can program that into an Excel spreadsheet and give it to you, and you can go out and price any building you want. So my brain power and my knowledge I can just hand over to you. And whilst that's very basic, and that's very deterministic, we're moving to a stochastic world where these technologies are not doing what the spreadsheet says. So if I always put in the same numbers, I get the same answer. If I put in the same numbers, I might get a different answer because they're learning. They're trying to understand what I actually mean. If, for instance, you put in a number that I hadn't thought of, the spreadsheet would crash. Doesn't anymore. It works out what the information it needs, or it changes your number to say, well, you really meant that. And so we are dematerializing both. And without the communications networks, there is no dematerialization because everything has to be on device. And that becomes big. And what worries me particularly, and the thing that we talk about very briefly in the book, is the fact that this is going to be integrated within us. And the communications is what allows that.
And that leads me directly to the question I wanted to talk about next, which is transhumanism. The phenomenon of frontier technologies being incorporated with humanity, which can mean philosophically, but also physically, with devices and technology incorporated into us through nanotechnology, biomachines, wearable technology, things like Neuralink that Elon Musk is leading. Tell us what intrigues you about that and what concerns you have about that.
Well, the intriguing part is it's inevitable. We have to be conscious that this is happening. the concern is it's inevitable, so it's going to happen. And what Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink doesn't worry me as much, because if I come to you and say, I'm going to insert a chip in your brain, you'll go, no, unless it's going to do something so amazing for me. It's quite a big step. Right. What I think is more likely to happen, and is what's happening, is putting compute power onto biomass. And that's already happened. If you look at Jensen Huang, who is clearly one of the greatest thought leaders of our time, his faculty that he sponsors and has his name on is the bioengineering faculty. Why? At Stanford. Why? Because he knows compute power is going to end up on biomass. And why is it good? It's light, so you can fire it into space. It self-replicates, because biological stuff replicates, so you don't need a factory. And it can be inserted into the body, and it's lightning fast. So if I said to you, I can give you an injection, and this thing is going to go around your body to say if you've got cancer or not. It's a much easier question than, am I going to put a chip in my brain? And then they say to you, Jimmy, I can now upgrade that, so not only can it detect the cancer, it can fight it. It's quite an easy decision. Or for my children, if it said their IQ is going to be 20 points higher, because I can put compute into them and I can store data, so all the memories they keep forgetting, it's on that in their body automatically. The question doesn't become so binary. It becomes slow upgrades. They've already got it for cancer. Now they've got it for this. Now they've got it for that. What happens with always-on communications, of course, is who controls that? What happens if we decide, the UK government in its craziness decides that people can't leave their houses on Wednesdays because of global warming, and they change your body that you cannot leave the house? I mean, you say that's farcical, but actually during COVID, that wasn't farcical. But if they could actually force you, or they could upgrade you to use less power, or this or that or the other, who knows where the world is going to end up. And as I say, it's inevitable. Yeah,
or not even use that technology to stop you from moving, but to alert some agency, right, of movements. I think that is not that farcical. And while I think we have those concerns, I think there's immense power to create wins with such type of transhumanism technology. In our final time here, I wanted to talk about some lessons that you hopefully can give our audience, which comprise of everyone from young students and aspiring entrepreneurs to people of our vintage in their professional years looking to learn new lessons about how to win in life and career. You've had a 30-year career in disruptive technologies. Along the way, what have you learned as the best lessons to help you achieve your biggest wins when implementing new technologies?
That's a really, really good question. It's slightly difficult to answer. Look, as I said earlier, it depends on what your win is. My father once said to me, if you went and became a professor at a university and did great things and discovered great things, I'd be very proud and happy. You don't need to necessarily, if you're wealthy enough to do that, that's a great win. One of the people, my very close friend, said to me a few days ago, she's actually an activist, a women life freedom activist, an incredible person. And she was talking to another friend of mine, she said, and the friend said, I don't really always get Daniel's motivation. And she said, he finds people with great potential and he motivates them to do something great. And that, to me, I love that that is the best win. The best win is to be able to motivate other people to create great things and to make a future that we all want. And it's not for me to define what that future is. I think another one of my great friends calls me insanely curious and slightly angry. And I think curiosity is really, really important, and to keep learning. It's important. One of my kids said to me, I got really good at this job. Now I'm doing another job, but some of the stuff I do is not so fun. It's like, I said, yes, because you're doing something new. So you have to learn it. So you're doing the junior stuff. If you stayed at what you were doing, you wouldn't have to do the junior stuff anymore, but you're not developing as a person. And so that's really important. But I think I would end on this. Despite the book being a warning book, I'm incredibly optimistic. Technology has solved some of the greatest problems of the world. It's the health, we clearly have a unequal, hot world, horrible in places, and we can see what's been happening over the last few weeks and years. But generally, we're becoming better, and our lives are becoming better. And there's no reason to think these technologies aren't going to do it. But we have to know that the jobs of the future are not going to be the jobs of the last 20, 30 years. They are going to be something new. And we should be curious enough to accept that that's going to happen, but also not be Luddites. It's very easy for us to say, I don't want to use this. We're big organizations. We don't want to use it. We see that what happens with Kodak. We see what happens with certain domains. They disappear. And we really need to be taking ourselves, our companies, our kids, our families, our communities through this and adopting these technologies. And they are phenomenal. You know, it's the first time I've seen that anybody anywhere in the world through a phone can access the most incredible technologies. Zuckerberg, who's number one on my list, he gives away Llama for free. You know, this is one of the most powerful technologies. Well, firstly, it's the worst AI we're ever going to have. But secondly, it is one of the most powerful technologies, if not the most powerful technology ever created. Quantum computers are the same. You can go onto Amazon and use them. That should fill people with such excitement and optimism. I went to Nigeria at the end of last year, and I was so amazed at the opportunities countries like that have. They don't have anything to break. They're highly entrepreneurial, and these technologies are available to them at the same time they're available to Silicon Valley. And I was like, you have such an opportunity. And I just want people to take that.
And that's why I dedicate some of my time to several developing countries, including Nigeria, where I have a good relationship with the National IT Development Agency, Pakistan, and my native Vietnam, because they are countries where there is not nothing, but there's less to break and more opportunity to launch these new frontier technologies. You mentioned that technology is going to be changing the future of work and the types of jobs people have in the next 20 years. I think for young people coming out of school and trying to be professionals and entrepreneurs, they're already embracing the learning of these new technologies much more easily. What would you tell to people who've already been in the professional workforce for, let's say, 10, 20, or like us, 30-some years about what they can do to win in this new workplace that will happen with emerging technologies?
Look, it's one of the most difficult questions, because bureaucracies and corporates are there to prevent change, actually, and to prevent people doing things on their own. Because especially when you get to regulated industries. But I don't think the opportunity's there. I think one of the things that I did so effectively when I worked in New York in the transformation was building enormous amounts of trust with people. And the people, and not necessarily the executive vice presidents, but the people that could actually make a difference and tell me things I needed to know. And the most important thing I think companies should be doing now is, one, the board should be involved in this, not handing it out to consultants or whatever. It's your company. Right. You know what you want. You know what your people are like. It needs to be done internally, and it needs to be done with urgency. But the second thing is, you need to build a trust base with your employees. There is nothing to believe that whilst the workforce and the jobs are going to change, we won't need more and more people in better and better jobs. There was the Luddism, I don't want to work, with the factories and these sort of things. But our work environment is way, way better than it was 200 years ago when we were in the fields in the UK and in Europe. And so we can have better jobs. It's just we don't want to have enormous failures along the way. We want to transform. We don't want to disrupt. And transformation only comes through trust. And if you understand your organization and you say to your people, and this isn't easy, I'm not suggesting it's easy, saying, we have your back. We have our customers back. We have our employees back. We have our shareholders back. We're going to do the best we can for everybody. That doesn't mean that your job isn't going to change. It doesn't mean that maybe we're going to have to find another job for some of those people. But we're not going to sacrifice everything just not to change.
You've mentioned over the course of this conversation your father several times. What would you say are the most important life lessons you've learned from your father?
That's a really difficult question because, look, I was really lucky. I had an amazing family life. I have a brother and sister. We have a very, very good relationship still. And my parents were both extraordinary, my mum and my dad. My father had a completely different career from me. He said to me once, he goes, the advantage I have had over you is I didn't have a rich dad. And, in the commercial world, that is a massive advantage.
It is.
But also, he also was married all his life. He did great things. He retired very young at 48 and then read and learnt and learnt. And I'm not academic like he is, but he did have a curiosity to understand things. And one of the most important things he always said to me, and I think I learned this having the Persian and the Iranian and the German and the Jewish side, is don't just discount something because you don't like it. We sort of live in an age at the moment where certain subjects you can't talk about. People don't want to hear it. Universities, I think it's appalling that universities say you can't talk about certain things. Because if you don't get the right data, the chances of making the right decision is impossible. So therefore, we have to get to a stage, or the most important thing he taught me, and I think the reason I am so curious is because I had parents that did really interesting things, moved location, were very supportive of me and my brother and sister, but also allowed us to be curious and didn't have a judgment over what we should do in the future. They didn't say, you need to be this, you need to be that. It doesn't mean they didn't encourage us to do things they thought were right. It just meant that they were proud of us for whatever we achieved.
In the conclusion to your book, Unsupervised, once more, for all those of you who haven't seen it, great book, you write something which I find very compelling, that, quote, creativity and empathy are the most important human assets. I love that you write that because one of my sort of business mottos is about innovation plus inspiration creating wins. I'm a big believer that technology plus heart are necessary to achieve something meaningful, something that matters. Why did you feel that important to underline in the conclusion of this book?
I think because we were searching for what humans are about. Humans are about empathy and creativity. They're not about processes. Processes are there society and processes are there to allow us to live together. But actually the great things that people achieve are through creativity and empathy. And just because you're creative doesn't mean you're empathetic. So these are different skills often. So I think that's very, very important. And it's like the gene for altruism shouldn't exist. Why do we have a gene for altruism? Because you would sacrifice yourself for your community. Therefore, all the people with altruistic genes would disappear because they would be the first to die. But actually, the reason it exists, Darwin thought, is because Darwin couldn't understand it. The reason they think it exists is because societies work better when we have those sort of skill sets. And what I see happening is as these technologies move to much more of our process skills, as they took over our manual labor, as they take over our processes, they become agents that can do things for us. We really need to focus on that. And so everything we do, from our education system to our corporates to our governance systems, must be about how we encourage creativity and empathy within people, because that's what's makes you truly human, not the fact that you're good at maths.
That's a fantastic set of observations. I want to thank you for taking this opportunity to speak with me here in London. Before we wrap up, why don't you tell our audience again how they can reach you if they are interested in participating in EdenBase, either as an investor for Fund 2 or as a tech venture that's interested in becoming part of your community?
Well, our website is EdenBase.com. My email address is Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L, @EdenBase.com. I'd love to hear from people. The only way I can do what I do is by talking to lots and lots of people. Someone said something we had a dinner last night, and our guest speaker, who was someone I wished I'd met 30 years ago as opposed to 3 months ago, he gave a completely counter opinion to a question someone asked to what I thought. And it made me think differently. And so that is the only thing that is important. So please, we will only grow by people caring. And I think we're a very good channel for people that want to make a world we're proud of. And therefore, we're interested whether you want to be part of our community, whether you want to provide us deals, whether you want to provide us money, whatever. Just being involved is the important part.
And the final words of your book are the famous quote that the journey of 1,000 steps begins with a single step. So what would you encourage people out there who want to get involved in this new frontier emerging technology world to do as a first step?
Apart from the glib read my book, because I think it is very good. Thanks to Stuart, it is a very good book. So I wrote the first 2 versions. He helped me write the third. And he managed to take an enormous number of ideas and make it very readable. And so I really want to thank him for that. And I think the book is not a bad starting point because we've really focused on what are the key technologies. You don't need to understand the technologies. You need to understand what they do. And I think we do a really good job of that. We go industry by industry and say these are the things that could happen. We talk about the ethics. But if I weren't saying read my book, I would say these technologies are inevitable. They're being built so fast. The amount of money that is being put in. The number that I always find fascinating is Mark Zuckerberg at Meta spent $16 billion last year on immersive technology, on a technology he claims he's not really working on. JP Morgan spent $15 billion on all their tech, the highest earning financial services company in the world. The amount of money that is being put into this means it's inevitable. The power these deliver is inevitable. You should use them. Notebook LM, I don't know if you've used Notebook LM by Google. I put in my book, all the bits I cut out. It creates a 12-minute podcast, insanely critical but also positive about my book. I also put in our deck for our fund, which is tiny. It's 20 slides, few words. Also created it. The insightfulness with which it talks about it, and I sent it to Eric, my partner, and he was saying he didn't realize it wasn't 2 people having a podcast on my book. He thought it was. He said, "That's amazing. 2 people have read your book and they're talking." I said, "This is all computing." I used Waymo, the driverless car. Insane. This is happening. The opportunity for you to build on those technologies and build something new once you know about them, and they're so easy to use, just do that.
Great advice. Read to learn about these new frontier technologies, whether it is unsupervised or whatever reading material you prefer. And secondly, use them. We will only understand their implications on our lives as well as career, venture, entrepreneurial opportunities if we actually begin to use some of these technologies. Daniel, I really want to thank you for spending time with me today here in London. We're missing Eric, the king of Shoreditch, but at least we're in Shoreditch. And I want to wish you a lot of luck in your journey with EdenBase. Hopefully we'll see big wins achieved along the way to a tech Eden. And I know some of my partners and I are looking forward to hopefully collaborating with you and your partners on that journey. With that, I want to say thank you to all those who watched this vodcast. This is Jimmy Nguyen on another episode of Win with Jimmy Nguyen with Daniel Doll-Steinberg, the co-founder of EdenBase here in London and the co-author of Unsupervised, a book that you should read to learn about the future of frontier technologies. Go out and empower the potential of all people to win in whatever you do.